Hey, everybody. Welcome to an all new episode of Defending the Windy City with David Drwencke. I am your host, Mike Leon. David here is a criminal defense attorney. He's the founding partner of DRD Law, where he brings courtroom strength, legal precision, and client centered strategy to every case. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about wrapping up this 3-part series that we did by Simon Sinek's. And in today's episode, we're going to be wrapping up our 3-part series here, inspired by Simon Sinek, Golden Circle. And in previous episodes, we've really explored David's why, the deeper purpose behind his work. We've talked about the how and how DRD Law brings that purpose to life through strategy, preparation, and values. And in today's episode, we're going to get into what DRD Law actually does and how does that work reflect everything we've talked about so far. David, good to see you as always. Let's start with this big picture part of this, which is what kind of criminal cases does DRD Law usually take on, and what types of clients do you guys typically represent?
Sure. Well, Mike, thanks for having me. The short answer is criminal cases. Now, that is unfortunately, while that sounds niche in and of itself, that's a huge umbrella. And when I first started the firm, it really did mean everything under the sun that would be a criminal charge, from low-level misdemeanors all the way through the most serious felonies. And while that's still generally true today, we still have some misdemeanor files. We have all manner of felony files. As time has gone by and we've started to earn more of a reputation in the community, it's a lot of gun cases, a lot of domestic violence cases, and then I would say a lot of homicide cases is really where when people find us through word of mouth as opposed to maybe more traditional marketing. They find us or find me. It's for those very serious violence offenses because we've had such success in winning those types of cases and going to trial and getting the best results.
Yeah. David, I think a lot of times for folks out there, they think of a criminal defense lawyer as just, or at least a criminal defense, I should say, as just either the trial or we're cutting a deal. But what does it look like from your lens, the full scope of representation, start to finish?
Sure, most of us, and we're as human beings, we're worried about the result, and I can't blame anyone. That's usually one of the first 2 or 3 questions I receive is, "Well, how much is this gonna cost me, and what do you think is going to happen? What's gonna be the end result?" And I'll tell them the same thing. We take financial stuff to the side. I'm not certain yet. We need to actually get into the file. We need to look at what a broad term, we call it discovery. Discovery is just that broad term that means evidence. That's the police reports, witness statements, if there's any kind of biological evidence or testing and so forth. We need to look at everything before I can start to talk about a negotiated plea or going to trial. And because the process, especially in Cook County, and I only chuckled because it's both frustrating and true, is that it's a process. It takes time, oftentimes months, and it's not unheard of to take a year or more. So the real what we're doing and then how we're doing it is metaphorically and sometimes literally holding someone's hand from that initial consult and trying to explain the process and what to expect to working through the process of managing the case and talking to the client. We've received something new. This is what we're seeing in discovery. Here's the next step. This is what we're still waiting for. After we've reviewed things, motion practice and potential trial strategies. There's a lot that goes into it to reach the result that everybody's focused on, and rightfully so, about whether we're going to plea and what that'll look like or what we're going to do at a trial. But there are months of work in building up to reaching that result, and it starts with reviewing the discovery.
So, David, let's elaborate a little bit more on a couple different parts here. Let's go to first people that have gotten their first arrest or their first criminal charge. How do you help them? You mentioned the hand holding. How do you hold their hand, help them understand what to expect from the legal process, managing expectations? Take us through that process.
Absolutely. Typically, during an initial consultation or after the firm has been hired, the first thing I'll tell people, whether it's the family or it's the actual accused client individual, is to breathe, exhale. I trust that they've had sleepless nights, if not for days, weeks, or months before we've gotten involved. And we have a tendency, just broadly speaking, as human beings, to think the worst. It's like, I've been charged, I've been accused, my life is over. I'm going to go to prison. I'm going to lose my job. I'm not going to be able to go to school. Whatever is on the front of their mind about the consequences. And what I have to try to hopefully have them understand is that worst place where your brain is going, that darkest potential outcome may be on some theoretical level technically possible. It's very rarely the case once we get involved, meaning that fear of the unknown, the anxiety of never going through this. Uh, don't go to that part yet. You're focused on the result. And again, I understand that, but it's a process of getting there. So what do? Yes, have them breathe, explain that we've handled cases like theirs at this point, quite literally hundreds, if not thousands of times. And I could start to try to give a range of expectations on a possible outcome, all the while, adding that asterisk of we have to learn the specifics of your case. The next part is explaining the process, the jargon, the terminology, especially for those who have never gone through this, that fear of the unknown, hearing words like grand jury, indictment, preliminary exam, arraignment, discover, I mean, a litany of words that we don't use on a day-to-day basis unless you're a criminal defense attorney. That fear just continues to go higher and higher. The anxiety grows higher and higher because it's all unknown. And where do most of my clients and most human beings go? They go to Google and then they see, oh my goodness, I'm facing potentially decades in prison and hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines. And it's like having to talk them off that ledge a little bit and explaining the process. And it's one of the best things I can hear after a consultation or after we've been hired is you actually hear the relief in a client's voice, or maybe it's mom or dad's voice when they're calling for a son or daughter, is an exhale and say, okay, I feel a lot better now that I've talked to you. And it's like, good, because that is, at least on the front end, that's part of my job, is to lower the anxiety level.
Speaking of lowering the anxiety level, for people that get a more serious offense, I would love to hear how you help lower their anxiety level, because you mentioned you deal with gun charge cases, drug cases, violent crimes potentially. What can they realistically expect from working with your firm?
Sure. And now it is case to case specific, but because we're aware of the different possible programs and outcomes, having done these types of cases, haven't taken these types of cases from beginning to end, I can, within a reasonable degree of certainty, answer that ultimate question. Again, we talked about it earlier. People want to know, am I going to prison? What is this going to look like? How is this going to affect my background both now and in the future? And by asking the right questions and knowing a little bit about someone's circumstances, whether they have a criminal background or not, if this is their first case or not, how old are they, among other things, learning a little bit more about their case allows us, as the experts in the room, to say, hey, I know you think you're going to prison. That's extremely unlikely in this situation. If it is one of the more serious cases, for instance, somebody who has a background and is caught with a gun, or somebody who's charged with homicide, which again can't get much more serious than that. It's explaining the process. Is prison potentially on the table? Well, yes, if we lose, but let's get through the discovery first. Let's see how strong or how weak this state case is. And then I can better advise whether we're going to negotiate out a plea or if we're going to go to trial. And I could say in both situations, we're going to get the best result. If I'm recommending negotiation, it's going to be the best possible offer and deal that we can get, because I know how to present things to both the state's attorney and to the judge. And if I'm recommending, and I think trial makes sense, it's through years of experience and understanding how to try these types of cases. What are the successful strategies? What is the case law? What are the loopholes? We know these things because this is what we do each and every day.
David, just in your response there, now I'd love to get a little bit more into your psyche, because you've handled everything from misdemeanors to high stakes felonies. How do you approach those different levels of cases without compromising your standards?
Sure. Well, it's treating every case the same. And that sounds maybe a little cliche and like a sales pitch or something. But the reality is, and I talk to our associates, I talk to our support staff each and every day, that yes, we know internally that this first time offender misdemeanor case, that there's effectively no chance that this client is going to go to jail. The client is fearful of that, and understandably so. And that case may not be overly complex. Again, it's something we've seen hundreds, if not thousands of times, and be serious in that number. But we take each case deathly seriously because for the client, it's one of one. It's the first time they've been arrested. It's the first time they've been in a criminal court. It's the first time they've faced and heard these terms. And we take that to heart. It goes back to some of the things we discussed in earlier episodes about the why, in being empathetic, in being sympathetic, and understanding that we're dealing with people usually on the worst day of their lives or following the worst day of their lives, that it's scary and they need to be treated with respect. And by viewing each case as a one of one, that gives the right level of service to our clients, what they deserve. That's what, what they're paying for, what they expect. But it also allows us to get the best result because we don't take things for granted. That yes, we may have seen this hundreds of times, but we're not going to just roll it off because there's always something new. There's some sort of nuance in the facts. There might be a new judge, a new state's attorney, a different officer, some little twist that's out there. And the only way you can know these little twists and turns and nuances is to throw yourself into it as if it was the first case, as if it is the only case that we're working on. And that's something that we talk about each and every day as a staff here at the law firm. And that's how we approach the cases because that's what the clients deserve.
So beyond the courtroom, David, I would love to talk about the impact of DRD laws in terms of outcomes that you're aiming with respect to working with these different clients, but also what does success look like for you and the bigger picture? Because you just talked about what you guys talk about at the firm. This is not just one case. We're trying to deliver to the community. Can you talk a little bit more about the impact and what success looks like for DRD law?
Absolutely. In our cases, as criminal defense attorneys, we are quite literally dealing with people's livelihoods and their freedom. That is true on the lowest level misdemeanors to the more serious felonies, that the consequences for our cases can't be more serious. They really can't. Whereas when we're talking about personal injury cases and civil cases, yeah, that deals oftentimes with a great deal of money. And I've said this before, no one wants to be sued and lose money, but what they like to lose even less is their ability to work or their freedom. We want to go to jail a lot less than we want to perhaps have to pay out some money. So the consequences and the results of our actions and how seriously we take these cases can never be lost on us. That it's oftentimes why I hate using the word plea negotiations, because it makes it sound like we in the state are equally yoked and in the same position. The reality is, if the state takes a case to trial and they lose, their ego may be bruised. Perhaps they have a victim's family that they have some tough questions to answer. But if we lose, if we don't appropriately advise our clients or get the right result, they have a criminal record. They could be potentially going to prison under the right circumstances, perhaps for the rest of their lives. And those consequences are what keep us so focused. So now, what is a good result? And it's an excellent question because in our line of work, victory and success can take a few different forms. Now, what do I mean by that? The easy answer is we'll go to trial and get a not guilty, or file a motion and get a case dismissed. That's the cloud nine, no better feeling than being able to walk out of the courtroom with a client, having them been exonerated, found not guilty, case dismissed. That's what we all live for. It's what you see in movies and television shows. And that does happen a great deal. We go to trial a lot and we do get a lot of not guilties. And I'm proud of that. But in so many other cases, victory can be finding the right outcome. We're avoiding jail time, minimizing jail time, perhaps finding the right type of program that a client can accept responsibility, plead guilty. However, if they successfully complete the program, case dismissed. They have no criminal background without the risk of going to trial and having it on their background for the rest of their lives. So every case can have a different type of outcome, and that may involve pleading guilty sometime, but it's getting the right result after looking. Again, we go back to the discovery and seeing the strengths and weaknesses. I don't take a lot of moral victories in my job. The goal isn't to go to trial and have the jury deliberate for 10 hours, but then find my client guilty. Like that's not that at the end of the day, my client's been found guilty. So there's no pats on the back or moral victories there. It's about getting the right result, assessing the evidence the right way so that I'm then advising my client to do the right thing. And what I mean by that right thing is taking a plea or going to trial so that they can get the best possible outcome for their circumstance. And sometimes that does involve taking a plea.
David, you touched on the end part here. It's going to follow up into this question perfectly because there's people probably listening out there to this that are maybe they just don't think they need a defense lawyer, or they feel a little embarrassed or even overwhelmed in the entire process, like we talked about with people that are first time offenders. What would you want them to know about what it is that you specifically do?
Sure. Well, if you're facing a criminal charge, it is. There's some human nature there, not only to kind of think the worst about the result, but just how fearful you are, how overwhelming it is to you don't know what you don't know. And you go online and start to Google things or start to try to do your own research. And somehow it only gets more scary and more confusing because of the jargon. We here at DRD Law, one of the first tenets, beyond the fact that, of course, we're criminal law focused, is that we pride ourselves on being approachable. That our goal isn't to talk over your head or to make ourselves sound important and use that jargon to talk over your head and scare you. It's actually just be people. And we recognize that our clients are just other people from the community that have unfortunately found themselves in a tough situation, sometimes through no fault of their own. And it's very scary. So, no, first and foremost, if you reach out to the firm through a web form, or you call into our intake department, or you find us on social media, or you're listening to this podcast, know that you can call and get a hold of a real person effectively 24 hours a day. And that we're here to answer those questions, to demystify the process, lower the anxiety level, and know that you're going to have an empathetic and sympathetic ear. There's no judgment. There's no set of facts that we haven't heard or seen before. We've handled every type of case that there is under that umbrella of criminal law. And to know you can call us and not feel embarrassed. Don't be scared. Don't worry that you don't know all the right jargon or the right questions, that we'll work it through the process with you, both in that initial consultation and the case at large. From beginning to end, you've got somebody in your corner.
How do you stay connected to the bigger mission we've talked about throughout the other episodes in this series?
Well, I think that's why I enjoy the book from Simon Sinek so much. That and it's actually entitled "It Start with Why," and that's what I've done. And we have our own vivid vision of the firm. It's something that's been shared with literally from reception, intake, associates, paralegals, and support staff through senior attorneys. We all know what the mission is and why we're here and what we're doing and how we're doing it is different. Are there other criminal defense attorneys out there? Yeah, absolutely. There's a few thousand of us out there, in fact. But do we all have the same mission and goal? Do we all have the foundational why we're doing this? And is that repeated each and every day? No. And you can see that each and every day when you go to court. You know, even if you're not facing a criminal charge yourself and you just think the criminal justice system is interesting, or you like watching true crime shows or podcasts and so forth, go to the criminal court building. You will see a drastic difference for those who are going through the motions and those who are passionate about it. Those who care about their clients and why they're there and how they're doing their job. And again, those who have gotten it beaten out of them or are there because they didn't have another option, or they're there kind of feeling their way through it because they're trying to be a jack of all trades. There is a foundational difference in why, how, and what we do. And I think someone who calls our firm, from again reception to intake to anybody else at this firm, from associates and paralegals, you will tell a difference in our tone, the way we approach cases, how we speak with our clients. Because of that, why, you get a better how and what.
David, thank you so much for the time and insights throughout this whole series. We truly appreciate it.
Thanks to you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
And thank you to everybody out there listening to another episode of Defending the Windy City with David Drwencke. If you've listened to this whole series, you've heard the heart, you've heard the strategy and the service behind DRD Law. And what David does is only powerful because of why he does it and how he makes it real, one case at a time, as you just heard. him say. If you or a loved one is facing criminal charges, you need a strong principal defense, do me a favor right now. Visit drdlawllc.com to learn more and connect with David and the team. And don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a review, and comment. Share this episode with somebody who needs to hear it. As always, I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Woo!